Hello and welcome back to another episode. Now, speaking of another episode, obviously there's an awful lot of hype at the moment surrounding Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens, and it feels sort of familiar. I'm incredibly excited, desperately excited for this new film. In fact, a friend of mine who runs a local cash converters actually got in touch and asked if I wanted this beautiful thing, which actually came in and was going for 50p in the store, and I was like, yeah, damn right, I'll take that off your hands. And so I did. 50p. It's actually sold out in all the local toy stores and supermarkets. So Kylo Ren's lightsaber is currently in my possession. So I could not be more excited for the upcoming Star Wars Episode 7. But it's reminded me of a time in my life which was very similar, and that was the build-up to the Star Wars prequels being released. Star Wars Episode 1 came out in 1999, and I remember distinctly having, let's put this over here, having extreme excitement for that movie. My time with Star Wars, I suppose, begins in the late 90s. Properly begins in the late 90s with the special edition re-releases, as it were. So I first saw Star Wars 4, 5 and 6 in the cinema, which is wonderful. It's a great thing to be able to say, is that I first saw that overhead shot in A New Hope or Star Wars in the cinema for the first time on the cinema screen, as so many people back in the 70s did. That is cool. That's a really cool thing, a really cool experience to have had. And then we had the build-up to Episode 1 in 1999. Now, it ended up being a big disappointment for many people, and this makes you think, oh, will Episode 7 also suck? Does it have the potential, despite all the hype, to be utterly rubbish? And I think things have changed. I think the directors' attitudes have changed. Well, frankly, the director's definitely changed. I think the audience expectations have matured, and I think actually the film industry knows that they can no longer just shovel out shite and expect us just to, oh yes, please give us more. But I have some confessions to make, and it's about, in particular, Star Wars Episode 1, and that is that actually I quite like it. Now, please just listen to me. Hear me out. Now, obviously, I've got the DVD with me on the shelf, and I rewatched it a couple of days ago, and it reminded me that at the time this was it. Do you know what I mean? At the time, this was George Lucas returning, bringing us the sort of the Star Wars prequel stories, the build up to Darth Vader that people had spoken about, talked about. I'd read about in expanded universe sort of stories and companion books and sort of visual dictionaries and all that thing. But for so long, I had heard about this Darth Vader, and especially even back in the 90s, the 80s, there was a story about Obi-Wan and Anakin having fought in some sort of lava-filled environment. We didn't really know what it was, but we knew that Vader was horribly scarred and burned and ended up in the suit. This was the beginning of that, and you got to remember that in 1999 there was nothing else. There wasn't the promise of other Star Wars films. There was also not the promise that anyone beyond George Lucas could deliver Star Wars. So actually, it was incredibly exciting, and on first viewing, it was good. Now, I don't know, at the time, let's see, 1999, I would have been 15 years old. So I don't know, here's a photo of me around about that age. And what happened, eh? But anyway, I was 15 and I was easily excitable, I guess. But also, I was very mature in my geekery. I put lots of time, lots of years into building up my love for Star Wars. And I remember in particular, we'd spend our afternoons, our lunchtime, just sort of actually walking quite literally circles around high school. We wouldn't actually necessarily even go in sometimes for our lunch in the canteen. We'd just do this sort of track sort of cycle of the school, walking past the music department, the history and maths department, all the way around past RE, beyond, art, past the PE department, around the side of the school hall, to the front, maybe pick up a chocolate bar or something while we were talking, come around the front of English, come past the library, back to the music department, and keep on going in that cycle until the bell went and we had to go back in again. And all the while we were talking about, I remember one conversation in particular talking about episode 1 and the Naboo planet, this place where people apparently loved art and they had this passion for beautiful things, and the spaceships would be handcrafted, and the contrast between Naboo, for example, and the Empire that we see in episode 4, and how the Jedi would come to Naboo, and how Naboo would be thrust into war. This would be the beginnings of the Star Wars. The Star Wars, almost I suppose like how we talk about things like civil wars or world wars. The Star Wars would begin in film, as it were, on Naboo. And this was so cool, so exciting. We literally spent hours of our lives just discussing this. Me and a few friends, several friends, we get so excited, so hyped for Star Wars Episode 1. And then came the release. And I remember going to see the film. And at the time, actually, I had my hair cut fairly short. And people were sort of saying, oh, it looks a little bit like a Padawan hairstyle after the film, because in the film we saw Obi-Wan with his short hair, little braid going on, and it was just exciting. Even though it had all the political talk, all the gumph that sort of slightly filled it up. At that point, at that time, at that age, that was my new Star Wars, and it was so good. It was good, And you may not be willing to accept that now, and it's kind of cool. It's almost too cool, I think, too easy just to go, oh, Star Wars prequels are all just rubbish. But at the time, they were what we were getting. Like it or not, that's it. And it was exciting. I remember the build-up, for example, in Star Wars Episode 2, reading magazines and hearing about, for example, the stunt coordinator, the head stunt coordinator, is it Nick Gillard, I want to say, but I might be wrong. Talking to George Lucas and saying, look, George, Star Wars, this isn't just your baby, this belongs to everyone, all the different fans, and therefore it has to serve them. And thinking, yeah, damn right, yes, okay, episode 1 might have been a bit of a letdown, I thought by then, but episode 2 is going to be on the money, and sadly it wasn't quite. But still, the build-up, the hype, the excitement, the possibilities, the probabilities of a new Star Wars were cool. And also in episode 2 we did get amazing scenes like that sort of chase through the asteroid field with that wow, there's bombs that Jango Fett is setting off in trying to get Obi-Wan on the way to Geonosis. It wasn't a terrible movie experience. Is it a great film? No, it's not a great film, but it wasn't a terrible movie experience. Now, some people at the time, and indeed since, have tried to defend the prequels, in particular Episode 1, by saying, oh, it's a kid's story, it's for children. Of course it's not for adults, therefore adults won't like it. What are you talking about? It's Star Wars, man, it's for kids. But that's not true. That's not true, and I've never believed that. In so much as, if you think about it, the best kids' stories only survive because parents are willing to tell and retell that story. Star Wars, the first 3 films, have only survived because they're good and they've been shared and reshared. Little Red Riding Hood has only survived because it's so much fun telling that story. My, what big teeth you have, Grandma. And so I do not think that Star Wars Episode 1, 2, and to a certain extent 3 were failures because they were aimed at children and adults were complaining about them. I think they were slight failures because of the quality of the dialogue, the writing, the romance, the believability of Amidala falling for someone who she is seen as such a small boy. I don't think that's entirely realistic. They should have really started probably with Anakin as a teenager, perhaps. Slightly older guy instead of this sort of, are you an angel? So I do understand, and I completely reject some of the defence which people have tried to put up for example, Episode 1. But you've got to remember that at the time, as I say, that was it. That was what we were getting, and it was so cool to know that you'd been there, that you'd seen Episode 1 in the cinema on a release night or on release day. it was exciting. And I remember going back up, up the hill after seeing the film in the cinema, talking, dancing around my friends, chatting about this exciting new universe, or rather say the expansion which had happened to the Star Wars universe. Seeing Naboo, seeing the droids, seeing the Trade Federation, seeing Coruscant, seeing probably the Emperor, although at the time obviously it was just the Chancellor Palpatine, and seeing the seeds sown for coming Star Wars films. It was so cool. In fact, it was so cool that we went away, and this is my second confession, we went away and we started a Star Wars fan club in school, and it didn't really go anywhere, to be honest, because, there were some injuries. Basically, it was a bunch of geeks who didn't know what they were doing, decided to get bits of wood which they had stolen or otherwise procured from the technology department and fabricate lightsabers. In my case, I made Obi-Wan's lightsaber, which you've got to admit is probably one of the best things from Star Wars Episode 1. That really cool lightsaber that Ewan McGregor has with the sort of the spikes on the bottom and the big red activation button. Just the design of the thing was so cool.
Other Jedis have other ones, but that's the one, isn't it? And it's mine.
I made one, so I got some metal pipe, put like a black ball on the bottom, put some sort of nubs on there, and the button and the sort of the grips. I made this thing really carefully and put this big wooden pole in it, painted it blue, and that was my lightsaber in this Star Wars fan club. We didn't really do much talking in the fan club. We sort of had really, really sad lightsaber duels, where usually someone would get hurt, so like their fingers would be hit by one of these metal poles, or one guy actually fractured his forearm, and we'd get bruises, but we'd be like, no, carry on and just like Fight Club, you emerge with bruises, but we also didn't want to tell too many people about it because it was our cool little thing. So I don't really see how this thing was envisaged as living on beyond us. I don't think we really properly thought it through, really. But it kind of ended because we were getting hurt too often, especially heading into sixth form towards the end of high school. But we did that. Yeah. And I remembered this because my wife was talking to me about how excited I am now for Star Wars Episode 7, and I was saying, this is nothing. You should you should have been there when I was making lightsabers and hurting myself. And she's like, yeah, because I'd have married you then. But that's exactly what was going on, I mean, it was an exciting time to be around, and we didn't know any better. We didn't know really, I suppose, what the film industry has learned since about, I suppose, marketability, but marketability because of, say, for example, believability, emotional investment. It's not just about special effects. It's not just about that sort of post-Jurassic Park sort of awe and wonder of what you can do with a computer. Now, and hopefully Episode 7 will also learn from this, now we know that you need emotional investment, you need character building moments, you need something which is more than just a special effect. George Lucas used to say that he understood that, he used to say that a special effect without story is a fairly boring thing. He seemed to forget that when it came to the prequels a little bit. But at the time, the prequels were incredibly cool, and I guess I just wanted just to talk about that because it feels like it's just become so fashionable, so cool, and so easy just to bitch about the prequels. Sorry, just to go, Star Wars Episode 1 was so lame, so rubbish, But at the time, it wasn't. At the time, I distinctly remember loads and loads of people being very excited. Yes, sure, there was the, George Lucas raped my childhood comments on the internet, but amongst especially teenagers and children and young adults, it was cool. It was cool to have our Star Wars, to have our Star Wars launch, which you heard adults talking about. I was there in 1977, I saw it in the cinema. It was cool to have that for ourselves. And And I'm so happy that I was there to see it. But more than that, I'm happy that I'm here now to see Star Wars Episode 7 coming to our cinemas, coming to our faces in December this year. But I just thought it was just worthwhile just taking a moment just to think about what it was like in 1999. What it was like waiting for that film, going round in circles, talking about this movie. And I guess the discussions that surrounded it and the films that followed. You know, I mean, after Episode 2, I remember this really big discussion with a friend talking about everything that George Lucas now had to do. You know, he had to wrap up things like various plot threads, for example, Palpatine, for example, how Anakin becomes Darth Vader, but also connect the technologies of these worlds. You know, so somehow link what we've seen in Episode 2, 1 and 2, in with Episode 4, and that's the 70s vision of especially computer graphics. You know, the hype was real and the conversations are real, and I think it's worthwhile just remembering that, you know. But in particular, I would strongly recommend that you don't start up a Star Wars club whose sole purpose is to just beat the crap out of each other, because it won't last long, people. Trust me. Anyway, guys, as ever, until next time, please do take care. If you've got any thoughts or feelings on the prequels, please do comment below. In particular, if you think that the prequels are just bitched about too much, I'd love to hear what you think, because yeah, they're not great, they're not amazing films. I know that, but I don't feel that, and I'm sure I'm not alone. So please do comment below. And I guess until next time, do take care. Bye bye.